And hey, we are here in 1897 and we're about to spawn the Victorian Football League. Teams are coming in, will be the Carlton Blues, Collingwood Magpies, Essendon Bombers, Fitzroy Lions, Geelong Cats, Melbourne Demons, South Melbourne Swans and St Kilda Saints. And anyways, let's go to the premiers for those first 10 years. 1897, Essendon were the first premiers that year. They won it in the round robin final system. And between 1898 and 1930, the final system was under the old artist banner. 1898, Fitzroy won the very first grand final, winning by 15 points against the previous year's premiers, Essendon. In 1899, Fitzroy went back-to-back, winning by 1 point against South Melbourne. And those grand finals were at the Junction Oval. In 1900, the third ever grand final was at the East Melbourne Cricket Ground in front of just 20,000 people, which Melbourne got up by 4 points against Fitzroy. 1901, Essendon won the premiership by 27 against Collingwood at the Lake Oval. Then come 1902, grand finals were becoming an MCG tradition. In 1902, Collingwood won the very first MCG grand final, 33-point winners over Essendon, in front of a crowd of 35,000 people. 1903, Collingwood won by 2 points against Fitzroy in front of 32,263 people at the cricket ground, while 32,688 showed up for Fitzroy versus Carlton in the 1904 grand final, which Fitzroy got up by 24 points, and that was premiership number 3 for the Lions. And they won a fourth one in 1905 with a 13-point win over Collingwood in front of 30,000 at the MCG. Then Carlton went on to win back-to-back premierships in 1906 and 1907. 1906, they ended Fitzroy's chances of a three-peat, winning by 49 points in front of 44,000 people, as the seats were starting to expand at the MCG at the time. 1907, Carlton won another grand final, winning by 5 points against South Melbourne in front of 45,477 people, and we'll be back on soon for the next 7 years of 1908 to 1914. And now it's 1908. 2 more teams are in the VFL. Richmond Tigers and the Melbourne University Students. The Tigers, they be looking to establish themselves as they were a VFA household name at the time. While University, well, they participated in a lot of uni competitions. In 1908, more seats are starting to come into the MCG. Carlton have done their first ever three-peat, beating Essendon in the grand final by 9 points. In 1909, South Melbourne are now premiers, ending Carlton's quest to go 4 in a row, winning by just 2 points in front of 37,759 people. 1910, Collingwood win premiership number 3 with a 14-point win over Carlton in front of 42,790 people. 1911, Collingwood lost their chance to go back-to-back, winning as Essendon will win their 3rd premiership, getting up by just 6 points in front of 43,905 people. 1912, Essendon go back-to-back in front of 54,000, winning by 14 points against the South Melbourne Swans. And that was the year Guernsey numbers were introduced into the league. 1913, Fitzroy win their 5th premiership up against the team that is barely even being mentioned in finals conversations at the time. They only won a lot of wooden spoons. St Kilda! Sorry, Saints fans, about 1913. 1914, however, the Blues got up by 6 points against South Melbourne, and that was the University's last season in the competition, and we'll be back soon for 1915 and then throughout the World Wars. And now it's 1915. Melbourne University have exited the VFL. In that year, Carlton won their 5th premiership, which was another back-to-back for them, as they beat Collingwood by 33 points in the grand final. As we go through the World Wars, I'm going to have to take a few scars out of the table because there was less teams in that time due to the wars. And here we go. It's the 1916 season is over. What a season from Fitzroy! What inspired us to start the season? And they were premiers in 4 teams, winning by 29 against Carlton in front of just a crowd of 21,130 people at the MCG, which was probably one of the worst attendances at the MCG I've ever seen. And now there's going to be 2 more teams coming back to the competition for the 1917 season. And the 1917 season is over. Fitzroy could do another back-to-back story. Collingwood have won the grand final that year in front of 25,512. Bit of an improvement from the previous year's crowd, as we were still in the trenches of World War I. As Collingwood get up by 35 points against the Lions, in front, as there was no Norm Smith medalist back then, which we'll get to later on. Same with the Brownlow medalists. And for 1918, two more teams are set to come back. Essendon and St Kilda. Here we are, 1918 is over. And, well, looks like World War I's just about over. 39,262 came to the grand final to see South Melbourne win by 5 points against Collingwood. It looks like there's going to be one more team coming back to the competition in 1919, and that is the Melbourne Demons. And now here we are, 1919 through to 1924, the first 6 years of post-World War I. 1919, Collingwood won the grand final, winning by 25 points against the Tigers in front of a crowd of 45,413 people. This was around that time when one of the 100 years pandemic has happened, the Spanish flu pandemic. 1920, well, it's finally happened. Richmond are premiers. 17-point winners over Collingwood in front of 53,000 people at the MCG. 1921, 43,000 people went to see them beat Carlton by 4 points in the grand final. 1922, Fitzroy reclaimed their throne with a 11-point win over Collingwood. 1923, Essendon got their crown back, winning by 17 points over Fitzroy, who burrowed the crowd in 1922. 1 year later, Essendon win their 6th premiership, but it's in a round-robin final system, as Richmond ended up finishing 2nd on the finals ladder. If they had that one more game, that would have added 1924 to their cabinet, as 3 more teams will be in the comp in 1925. Back from the last part, well, Edward Carty Greaves won the Brownlow medal in 1924 with 7 votes. And now we move on to 1925. Hawthorn, North Melbourne and Footscray are now in the competition. Geelong would win their very first premiership in 1925, beating Collingwood by 10 points in the grand final in front of 64,000 people at the MCG. And that would be the year Colin Watson from the Saints win the Brownlow with just 9 votes. 1926, Melbourne won the premiership by 57 over Collingwood, and that truly was Ivor Warne-Smith's season. He won the Brownlow, and he could have won that year's version of the Norm Smith medal. 1927 to 1930, 4 in a row for Collingwood. And I feel sorry, I'm so sorry, Richmond fans. You have to put up with that pain 3 times. 27, 28, and 29. Just couldn't get over Collingwood. They were just too good back then. As they had so many Brownlow medalists on that team. 1927, Sid Coventry won it that year with 7 votes. 1928 went to Ivor Warne-Smith with 8 votes with his 2nd Brownlow medal. 1929 went to Albert Collier. 19 from Collingwood, 1930 Brownlow medalist was Harry Collier from Collingwood, Alan Hopkins from Footscray and Stan Judkins from Richmond. As in 1931, Geelong would win their 2nd flag in front of 60,000 people against Richmond. Tigers fans, your revenge will be coming soon. 1932, Richmond win their third premiership, beating South Melbourne, beating Carlton by 9 points. They play South a few years later. 1933, this will be the first of the two Richmond-South Melbourne grand finals. 33 belong to South Melbourne, 42 points over Richmond, with the first ever crowd in front of 70,000 for a grand final. The MCG's on the horizon. 1934, Richmond get their flag back with a 39-point winner over the team that barred the crown of the previous year, South Melbourne, in front of 65,000. 35 and 36 were back-to-back years for Collingwood, both times over South Melbourne. 1937, Collingwood would start their losing streak of 3 straight grand finals, losing to Geelong in 37 in front of 88,000, Carlton in 38 in front of 96,000, and Melbourne in 39 in front of 78,000 people. Those years Brownlow medalists, well, Fitzroy have had like 5 Brownlow medalists in that period. Hayden Bunton done it 3 times. Wilfred Chicken Smallhorn won in 1933, and Dennis Ryan won in 1936. 34, 37 and 38 were the years that Dick Reynolds won the Brownlow medal for Essendon, with vote tallies of 19, 27 and 18 votes respectively. Bunton won it with 26 and 31, 23 and 32 and 24 and 35. 1939 was Marcus Whelan's year to win the Brownlow medal for Collingwood with 23 votes. And this will be around that time when World War II will be getting started. However, between 39 and 41, Melbourne have won 3 in a row, beating Collingwood in 39. They beat Richmond in 1940. 1941, they've taken down the Bombers, and there'll be one team out of the comp for World War II when we're up to 1942. And now we move on to the 2 years of World War II with 2 Richmond and Essendon grand finals, 1942 and 1943. The MCG was not even used for the grand final that year because it was stationed for the Army. In 1942, 49,000 showed up for the grand final at Princes Park, which Essendon got up by 53 points against raging favourites Richmond. 1943, the Tigers got their revenge, 5-point winners over Essendon. In one of the last grand finals at Princes Park, as then we move on to 1944, Geelong returned to the comp that year. And I forgot to mention the Brownlows in 1940 to 1941 before we got to the part. 40 was Des Fothergill and Herbie Matthews winning it with 32 votes from Collingwood and South Melbourne. 1941, Norman Ware from Footscray won it with 23 votes. 2042 to 45, no Brownlow medalist was awarded due to World War II. And now we move on to 1945. Richmond are in their 3rd straight grand final, but it's at the Junction Oval. And he lost by 15 points against eventual Junction Oval tenants Fitzroy. 1945, the bloodbath grand final at Princes Park. The last one outside of the MCG for a while. Carlton won by 28 points against South Melbourne. And now we shift our focus to the latter half of the 40s. World War II is over. That's when World War II was finally over in 1946. Things were getting back to normal. Brownlow medalists were back. Just going to mute my computer. And now we move on to the second half of the 1940s. 1946. Essendon have won the grand final by 63 points against Melbourne in front of a crowd of 73,743 people at the MCG. 1947, Carlton win their 8th premiership with a 1-pointer over Essendon in front of 85,815 people. But in those years, Don Cordner won the 1946 Brownlow medal, and Bert Deacon won in 1947 with identical vote tallies of 20 votes. 1948, Melbourne and Essendon originally drew the grand final in front of 85,000. And then they had to replay it in front of 52,000 people, which Melbourne got up by 39 points. And that year's Brownlow medalist was Richmond's Bill Morris. 1949, Essendon got up by 73 points against Carlton in front of 90,000 people. First time an MCG Grand Final was in front of 90,000. As capacity continued to expand, Cole Austin from Hawthorn and Ron Clegg from South Melbourne won it with 23 votes. And then now we move on to the 50s. And now we move on to the 50s, the rock and roll era, the Elvis era. Essendon won back-to-back in 1950, beating North Melbourne in the grand final by 38 points, with Alan Ruckford from Fitzroy winning the Brownlow by 21 votes. 1951, Geelong won their 4th premiership and they went back-to-back in 52, which was the same year Elizabeth II would become the new Queen. Got it. And now we move on to 1952, Elizabeth II's the new Queen. Geelong win the grand final by 46 over Collingwood, with Roy Wright from Richmond and Bill Hutchinson from Essendon winning the Brownlow on 21 votes each. Hutchie won it again in 53 with 26 votes, which Collingwood were premiers that year by 12 over Geelong. 1954, Richmond's Roy Wright won another Brownlow medal, and Footscray are now premiers, winning by 51 against Melbourne. And then from 55 through to 59, it was nearly 5 in a row for Melbourne. They beat Collingwood in 55 and 56 in front of 88,000, and the first time 100,000 plus capacity in 56, as the new stand was opening up for the Melbourne Olympics, with Fred Goldsmith winning the Brownlow in 55 with 21 votes. 56 went to Peter Box from Footscray. Then St Kilda went back-to-back in 57, 58, and they put Freedom on 59 in the Brownlows. Brian Gleeson won it in 57. 58 went to Neil Roberts. 59 was Vernon Howe and South Melbourne. And South Melbourne's Bob Skelton. But the only thing that stopped Melbourne winning 5 in a row was Collingwood in 1958, winning by 18 points against Melbourne. As we finish up the Elvis era from the 50s, and now we're about to move on to the Beatles era of the 60s. And now we move on to the 60s, the Beatlemania era. In 1960, John Schultz from Footscray won the Brownlow with 20 votes. Melbourne won their 5th premiership in 6 years with a 48-point win over Collingwood. Collingwood had kicked the lowest grand final score of all time, 2-2-14. 1961, Hawthorn are premiers for the first time, winning by 43 points against the Bulldogs. John James from Carlton was a Brownlow medalist with 21 votes. 62, Alistair Law from Geelong won the Brownlow with 28 votes, but Essendon were premiers that year by 32 points. 1963, Bob Skelton won the Brownlow from South Melbourne yet again, but it would be Geelong who would be premiers by 49 over Hawthorn. 64, Melbourne have won their premiership in front of 102,000 people against Collingwood. That year's Brownlow medalist was Carlton's Gordon Collis. But Melbourne fans, well, it's going to be a long time till I mention you being premiers again. That was how Barassi moved to Carlton in 65. Essendon won by 35 points over the Saints, with Noel Teasdale from North Melbourne and Ian Stewart from the Saints winning the Brownlow medal with 20 votes. Ian Stewart won again in 66, and finally the Saints march into a premiership after 70 years. 1 point win over Collingwood. And I'm so sorry, Saints fans, this is the only time I'm going to mention you being premiers. 1967, Richmond won the premiership by 9 points against Geelong. Revenge for 1931. And that year, Ross Smith won the Brownlow medal from St Kilda. 1968, Bob Skilson won his 3rd Brownlow medal as Carlton got up by 3 points against the Dons in front of 116,000 people. 119,000 turn up in 69 as Richmond would stop the Blues from going back-to-back, winning by 25 points over Carlton. That was the year Kevin Murray won the Brownlow medal. As now we finish off the Beatles era of the 60s as we're about to move on to the ABBA era of the 70s. And now we're in the disco era of the 70s. In 1970, Carlton were 44 points down in the grand final against Collingwood. And then Ron Barassi gave them a massive spray in the 1970 grand final. He said, right, you're going to have to start handballing for your life. And that got Carlton over the line, winning their 10th premiership. As Peter Bedford won the Brownlow medal that year from South Melbourne. Ian Stewart won his next Brownlow in 1971, but he's now a Tiger. As they win by 7, however, his old side St Kilda would lose by 7 points against Hawthorn. If they still had Ian Stewart, well, Saints would have won their 2nd premiership. 1972, the highest scoring grand final of all time. Richmond kicked 22-18, 150. That score would have won you a grand final every year, but Carlton had the better score, 28,977. And that was in front of 112,000 people. Brownlow medalist that year was Collingwood's Len Thompson. 73 and 74, this was around that time when North Melbourne had their 10-year roll, which brought a lot of very good players to help the Kangaroos out, with Keith Gregg winning 2 Brownlow medals in that span. Richmond won by 30 against Carlton in 73 and 41 against North in 74. Although Gary Dempsey won the Brownlow medal in 1975 with 20 votes, North Melbourne would be premiers for the very first time, beating Hawthorn by 55 points. As Hawthorn will get their revenge in 76, although Graham Moss will win the Brownlow medal that year from Essendon, with a complicated voting system like 3 umpires and with the 2 umpire system being introduced, as 2 umpires having separate vote cards. Hawthorn won by 30 in the grand final against the Kangaroos. North got their crown back in 77 with a 27-point win in the replay over Collingwood. But that would be the year South Melbourne's Graham Teasdale would win the Brownlow medal. 1978, the Brownlow medal voting was back to normal. Malcolm Blight would win it with 22 votes for North Melbourne, but his team would lose to Hawthorn in the grand final. 1979, Carlton would win the grand final over Collingwood, and that would be the year the Norm Smith medal would be introduced for best on ground in the grand final. The very first one was Carlton's Wayne Harms, and that was in front of a slog at the MCG. That was, well, better than what the SANFL grand finals will ever produce that year. And now we move on to the first 2 years of the 80s, which will be the last 2 years of South Melbourne. And now we move on to the 80s, the nationalisation of the league. And that was the era where disco music is ending and synthesizers were getting used in music. 1980, Richmond would win their 10th premiership, and this will be their last premiership for a while, as they won by 81 points over Collingwood. And it's 1981, Collingwood win by 20 points over, Carlton win by 20 points over Collingwood. However, in those years, 1980, Calvin Templeton won the Brownlow medal from Footscray with 23 votes. 1981, Bernie Quinlan and Barry Round would win the Brownlow by 22 votes. Quinlan was at Fitzroy and Barry Round was at South Melbourne for their very last season. And now we move on to 1982, South Melbourne are now the Sydney Swans. They've decided, well, they're not financially suited to Melbourne anymore, as Sydney will help them out. And Carlton would win their 14th premiership that year, beating Richmond by 18 points. It will be sadly their last grand final for the next 30 years. Brian Wilson will be the Brownlow medalist that year from Melbourne. 1983, Ross Glendinning won the Brownlow medal from North Melbourne with 24 votes. But it'll be Hawthorn who will be premiers against Essendon by 83 points. The Bombers get their revenge against the Hawks in 84 and 85, winning by 24 points and 78 points respectively. Although Peter Moore won in 79 at Collingwood, he won in 84 at Melbourne. For the Brownlow, 85 would belong to Brad Hardy from Footscray, the guy who was always wearing long sleeves. 1986, the last year with just these 12 teams. Hawthorn won the grand final by 42 points over Carlton, and that year's Brownlow medalist was Hawthorn's Robert DiPiomenico and Sydney's Greg Diesel Williams. And 2 more teams will be coming in 1987, based in Brisbane and Perth. And now we move on to 1987. Well, two more teams will come in. We've got a team based in Queensland now, the Brisbane Bears. But they're going to be based in the Gold Coast for these first few years. West Coast Eagles, they're from Western Australia, as the Western Australian Football Commission has accepted them into the competition. In 1987, Carter will win the premiership, being the first premiers in the new era, winning by 33 points over Hawthorn. That year's Brownlow medalist will be Hawthorn's Johnny Platten and St Kilda's record goal scorer Tony Plugger Lockett, aka the league's best goal scorer of all time. 1988, Sydney's Jared Healy will win the Brownlow medal, although it'll be Hawthorn's premiership that year, winning by 96 points over Melbourne. I'm sorry, Melbourne fans. You know you've waited a long time for this grand final moment, but it didn't happen. 1989, Hawthorn won again. 6 points over Geelong. Well, at least the Cats put up a bit more of a fight in 89. That year's Brownlow medalist was Geelong's Paul Couch. And now we move on to the 90s. That would be the year 80. It's the end of 80s synthesizer music and the start of, well, kind of a bit more dance music, or a bit more like Europe, or even a bit more like hip-hop rap music. Collingwood won the premiership in 1990, winning by 48 against Essendon. And now we're going to add in one more new team coming in for 1991, and that's the Adelaide Crows. And now we are in 1991. We finally have South Australia in the competition. The Adelaide Crows. It took a while for the SANFL to finally accept it, as Port Adelaide tried to enter through the back door in 1990 to get into the comp. However, in 1991, the competition was starting to become truly national. Hawthorn would win their ninth premiership over the West Coast Eagles by 53 points, with Jim Steins from Melbourne winning the Brownlow medal with 25 votes. That certainly was a year of change. 1992, Geelong would lose the grand final by 28 points, as the VFL AFL premiership has finally spread its wings and has gone to Western Australia. After 95 years in Victoria, they've finally got a holiday, with the West Coast Eagles winning the premiership that year, but before Scotty Wine winning the Brownlow medal. 1993, Essendon's Gavin Wanganeen will win it with 18 votes. He'll be the first Indigenous player to win the Brownlow medal. Essendon will win the grand final by 44 over Carlton. As I forgot to mention the Norm Smiths in the 80s. 80 went to Kevin Bartlett. 81, Bartlett, Joel, Rioli, Robertson, Duckworth, Madden, Ayres, Reece Jones, Ayres, and Ablett Seed, who won in 80 to 89. 1990 was Tony Shaw. 91 was Paul Dare. 92 Peter Matera. At 93 Michael Long. Now we move on to 1994, the last year with 15 teams in the comp. West Coast will win their second premiership by 80 points against Geelong. Diesel Williams will win his second Brownlow, and the Norm Smith will go to West Coast Dan Camp. As one more team's going to come in for 1995, as it's going to be a crucial time for Fitzroy and Brisbane Bears. It's 1995. Western Australia will have a second team in the AFL. The Western Derby will officially be born. The Fremantle Dockers have joined the competition. Anyway, enough about the introduction of the Dockers. Carlton will be premiers that year. 61-point winners over Geelong. Brownlow medalist was Sydney's Paul Kelly. Norm Smith medalist, Carlton's Diesel Williams. 1996, the league's 100th season. North Melbourne win their third premiership. 43-point winners over the Sydney Swans. And we say goodbye to Fitzroy and the Brisbane Bears. They're going to be merging to become the Brisbane Lions, and we'll see you in 1997. Now it's 1997. Footscray have changed their name to the Western Bulldogs. Brisbane Bears and Fitzroy are officially no more. They're the Brisbane Lions now. Port Adelaide are also in the competition as the second South Australian team. 1997, the Crows will be premiers for the first time, and they win again in 98. with Andrew McLeod winning both Norm Smith medals, and both Brownlows belong to Robert Harvey. 99, North Melbourne would be premiers again with a 35-point win over Carlton, as that year's Brownlow medalist would be Hawthorn's Shane Crawford. Norm Smith medalist was North Melbourne's Shannon Grant. 2000, we move on to the new millennium. Essendon have won the premiership, we're losing just one game. 60-point win over Melbourne, another long wait Demons fans. As that year's Brownlow medalist was Melbourne's Shane Woden. Norm Smith medalist, Essendon's James Hird. 2001, 2 and 3, the Brisbane Lions have won 3 in a row, with wins over Essendon and Collingwood 2 straight times. The Brownlow medalists were Jason Ackermanis for Brisbane in 01, 02 was Simon Black from Brisbane, 03 went to Mark Rasciuto, Nathan Buckley and Adam Goods from Adelaide, Collingwood and Sydney respectively. The Norm Smith medalist 2001 was Sean Hart, 2002 was Nathan Buckley, 2003 was Simon Black. 2004, Port Adelaide would claim the crown with a 40-point win in the grand final over the Brisbane Lions in front of 77,000 people. Brownlow medalist will be Chris Judd. Norm Smith medalist, Byron Pickett. 2005 and 6, Swans and West Coast have played each other in both grand finals. West Coast had a Brownlow medalist in 05 in Ben Cousins and a Norm Smith medalist in Chris Judd, but the Swans were premiers by 4 points. First time in 72 years. And their first one in Sydney. 2006, Sydney had a Brownlow medalist in Adam Goods. West Coast had a Norm Smith medalist in Andrew Embley, but the Eagles get up by a point. 2007, it's been a Geelong dominating year. Bartel would win the Brownlow medal, Stevie Johnson would win the Norm Smith, and they win the grand final by 119 points against Port Adelaide. Right, that'll be the last time we'll be seeing the Power in the grand final for a while. 2008, Hawthorn by 26 over Geelong. Brownlow medalist was Adam Cooney, Norm Smith medalist was Luke Hodge. 2009, it was Geelong winning their second flag in 3 years, beating the Saints by 12 points. Brownlow medalist Gary Ablett Jr., Norm Smith, Paul Chapman. 2010, last year with just 16 teams. Collingwood drew the grand final originally against the Saints and win the replay by 56 points. Brownlow medalist was Chris Judd, but there were 2 Norm Smith medalists in 2010. The drawn one was Lenny Hayes. The replay was Scott Pendlebury. And now we're about to move on to 2011 as we're going to have a new team come in for the first time in a while. Here we are, 2011, the only year with 17 teams in the competition. Geelong have won their 9th premiership, winning by 38 against Collingwood. How do they do that without Gary Ablett? He's at the... Where is he? Well, we just found out on Hotmail he's at the Gold Coast Suns. Anyways, we move on to the Brownlow medalist that year. It'll be Collingwood's Dane Swan. Norm Smith medalist will be Geelong's Jimmy Bartel. And now we move on to 2012 as another new team is coming in. The buys are officially gone, but except for a couple of rounds. GWS are in the comp now. Now it's 2012. Swans are premiers by 10 points against Hawthorn. Brownlow medalist would be, well, it was originally Essendon's Joe Watson, but he got done for a doping scandal. However, the Brownlow medalist would now be Sam Mitchell from Hawthorn and Trent Cotchin from Richmond. As the Norm Smith medalist was Ryan O'Keefe from the Swans. Hawthorn have gone and kick-started a free heat between 2013 and 15, winning by 15 over Freo, 63 over the Swans and 46 over West Coast. Brownlow medalists that year were Gary Ablett Jr. from Gold Coast in 2013, 2014 was Matt Prittis from West Coast, 2015 was Nat Fife from Fremantle. Norm Smith medalists were 3 Hawks, Brian Lake, Luke Hodge, Cyril Rioli. 2016, the Dogs would win the premiership for the second time, beating the Swans by 22 points. Brownlow medalist, Geelong's Paddy Dangerfield. Norm Smith medalist, Western Bulldogs, Jason Johannesson. 2017. Well, Richmond are premiers again. They beat Adelaide in the grand final by 48 points. Brownlow medalist and Norm Smith medalist, Dustin Martin. 2018, West Coast would borrow the crown with a 5-point win over Collingwood. Brownlow medalist, Hawthorn's Tom Mitchell. Norm Smith medalist, West Coast Luke Shuey. 2019 and 2020. But 2019, the Tigers win the premiership in front of 100,000 at the MCG, beating GWS in the grand final. Brownlow medalist would be Freo's Nat Fyfe once again. Norm Smith medalist, Dustin Martin for the second time. 2020. Got it. And now we move on to the 2020s, the pandemic era. Coronavirus pandemic era. 2020, Richmond will win the premiership in front of the worst grand final crowd in a long time. 29,000 people at the Gabba. First grand final away from Melbourne ever. It was a 31-pointer over Geelong, Brownlow medalist, and that was the first Brownlow medal away from Victoria since 1999. We're hosting rights. Lockie Neal would win the Brownlow medal that year. Norm Smith medal, Dustin Martin for the third time. 2021, Melbourne would be premiers that year. Finally, Melbourne are premiers once again, beating the Bulldogs in the grand final at Optus Stadium in Perth. First grand final away from the Eastern Seaboard. The Brownlow medal was also in Perth. That would be Port Adelaide's Ollie Wines winning the Brownlow that year. Norm Smith medalist, Melbourne's Christian Petrarca. 2022, we're back to normal. MCG finally hosts the grand final once again. Geelong by 81 against the Swans. Brownlow medalist would be the first of two for Carlton's Paddy Cripps. But Lockie Neal would win in 2023. Norm Smith medal, 2022, Isaac Smith. 2023, Bobby Hill. 2024, Will Ashcroft. 2023, Collingwood will win it by 4 points against the Lions. And now we move on to the present day. The Brisbane Lions win the grand final by 60 points against Sydney. As well, in the future, Tasmania will be coming into the comp in 2028. And we'll see where the 20th team will be located after Tasmania. And that's the end of the timeline.